Hey guys, so I'm gonna go over a hopefully brief explanation of like what's how you run the code, like what I've changed. I tried to change as little as possible so that your workflow stays as much the same as possible. Uh, yeah, well, I've tried to make it so your workflow is easier and yeah, you can do stuff faster, you can work faster. So yeah, I'll start with uh first of all, I'll start with you can run your code exactly the same way as you used to run it before. You can run it locally just as you used to run it before. The only thing you need to do to make sure it runs well locally is you need to go to this environment variable at the bottom here and change the rabbit's host to local host. That's the only thing you need to do. And just as Raf said, you can run, first of all, you have to do pip install -r requirements.txt. And then, like he said, you go to the folder and to start, well, let's go to a different one. You go to the folder and then you start the service. It works exactly the same. All right. So, what if we want to connect to Docker? If we want to use Docker to run it, we have to change this back to RabbitMQ. Uh, okay, backtrack before we go to the Docker parts. Just a little tip that may save you a lot of headache. Uh, First of all, the benefit of running it locally is that you can actually debug your code. You can run the debugger, and if it's running locally, you can like follow the code. You can't do that when it's running on Docker. But if you're facing any errors when you're running the debugger, like I was, and I spent way too long trying to figure out the problem, uh, what you can do is if it's telling you that if it's like some problem with something you're importing, instead of doing pip install -r requirements.txt, sorry, instead of doing pip install -r requirements.txt, what you do is python 3 -m and then pip install blah blah blah. That makes sure the dependencies are installed to the correct Python environment. It will save you a lot of headache if you ever run into that problem. But okay, yeah. So now we've gone over running it locally, running it on Docker. Uh, so I'll try to give you only keep it as quick as possible. Show you only like the most essential stuff, and the rest of it you can Google and figure out on your own. But I'll show you what you need to actually get working. Uh, so the code lives locally on your local environment. If you want to put it on the Docker containers, we actually have to copy these files and move them onto each of the containers. That's part of the build process of like Docker. When it's building a container, it copies the correct code that's required for that container and moves it onto the container. So we have to build before we can actually run the code on the container. So to build, we do docker compose build. So this builds all the containers. If I run it, you see it's starting to build all the containers. Uh, if I want to build only a specific container though, I do docker compose build, and then I specify the name of the container. And to see the names of the containers, you go to docker compose. So there's relay API, scheduler, and so on. Say I want to rebuild the scheduler. I mean the relay API. This builds the relay API. Now the code is on the container for the relay API. If I ever make any change to any code, you have to rebuild so that the latest code will be on the Docker container. And if you want to start up the Docker container after building it, you can do docker compose up. This will start up all the containers. If you want to start up a particular container, specify it. So this starts up the relay API container and all of the other containers it depends on. If we want to, instead of doing two commands, if we want to build and then start it up at the same time, we basically do docker compose up and then add the build flag. Build relay API. So this builds it first and then starts it up. So that's pretty much all you need to know for running running uh, running your code on Docker. That's pretty much it. I'm gonna end the video now, but I'm gonna make another video explaining how to view your logs, and another one explaining the changes I made to RabbitMQ.